Okay, and then I'm gonna share. So, is everyone seeing my slides, PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So we want to welcome everyone to Environmental Fridays. It is personal. Um, Interestingly, or I don't know what the adjective might be, but today is what we call Dead Friday here at Andrews. So there are no classes, and hopefully our students are studying for exams for next week, but we'll see. Um, so we want to invite everyone to join us online at our Facebook group. All you really have to do is go to Google and put in Environmental Fridays Facebook. That's it. If you do that, the very first hits would be our group. And the same is true for our YouTube playlist. If you go to Google and put in Environmental Fridays, YouTube playlist, the very first hits that you will find is our YouTube playlist. And there are several of them. This QR code will take you to the current playlist for this semester. Our December schedule, we begin with Ari today, and you will hear more about her and more from her pretty soon. Then next week, December 13th, we will hear from Trinidad, actually from the Caribbean, but Earl is based in Trinidad, and he'll be discussing permaculture and regenerative landscaping in the Caribbean. So that should be a pretty interesting topic. And our last speaker for this episode, well, for this season is going to be Stephanie, and she actually just got a new job at Zoo Miami. So we'll probably hear about her exciting uh, career and her transitions. So that's our lineup for December. And at the last event here, at the last episode, we'll give you an insight into our January schedule. So this morning, I have the pleasure of connecting up here with a recent friend. It's just about 2 months or so old.
I think so, yes.
Yes. She was very kind to be a guest speaker for my class here with my senior students to help them prepare to give oral presentations in that class. So she is, in fact, an award-winning science communicator, science journalist, keynote speaker, podcast host. What's your podcast address and stuff? We should have people aware of
Yeah.
it.
So I have hosted a couple. I'm actually in between right now, but I
Okay.
had a Science Pub podcast, which can be streamed on PBS and the PBS player.
Okay.
And I did a podcast with the National Girls Collaborative Project talking about women and girls in STEM and the challenges and barriers and action items as girls move through, being little and some of the stereotypes as far as the toy section, right? And the
Mhm.
dinosaurs and pink dresses, and why can't we combine them all the way up to getting a STEM degree and being in a career and support systems to help keep people where they want to be.
Yeah, it's very much still that type of advocacy is very much still needed in the STEM areas. There has been some improvement in the number of women and young ladies getting into STEM fields, but yeah, improvement is still needed. So Nancy has been in this field for about 24 years or so. And I think if you listen carefully to what she said, she is actually a former PBS NPR affiliate producer. And she's done a number of guest lectures at universities across the United States and internationally. She's passionate about STEM accessibility. You just heard it for yourself in her own words, and to inspire audiences to connect with science and environmental issues. You'll probably be hearing her as a guest speaker in one of our seasons that's upcoming, because she has a lot to speak on and share with us. So Nancy, thanks for being part of Environmental Fridays, and it's your turn to introduce our guest speaker today.
Well, thank you for that great introduction, and I would be honored to be a speaker. And welcome to everyone who has joined us this morning. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules as we get to the end of the year. With it being, that first Friday in December, it seems like this is the day that every single event that's going to happen before the end of the year is happening on this day, at least on my calendar. I've got, it's super, super packed. It's like, everybody spread it out a little bit. So thank you for taking time. And we have a great program for you this morning. I am delighted to be able to introduce Ari Saikawa. And Ari is a professor and Winship Distinguished Research Professor of Environmental Sciences at Emory University. She holds a bachelor's degree in chemistry and in biotechnology engineering from the University of Tokyo, Japan. She has a master's degree in environmental policy and natural resource management from Indiana University, and her PhD in science, technology, and environmental policy from Princeton University. Her research interests are focused on quantifying the sources and magnitude of various emissions linked to air pollution, climate change, and soil contamination, as well as the impacts of these on humans and our society. So we are very excited to have you today, and I'm really interested in hearing your talk this morning. So good morning, Ari.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nancy. This is such a pleasure to be on this. So I guess thank you also for the invitation, Desmond. We were planning to have it earlier, and I'm so
I
glad
know.
that this is happening.
Yes.
So I will share my slides. And you said this is Dead Friday. I definitely feel dead already. So thank you to everybody coming out. I know it is so much going on, as Nancy said. So what I'm going to talk about, I will try to do some kind of a story, including why I came here, and also why I'm doing the research that I'm doing. And I think the introduction was just so great because I actually became a scientist because I was told that girls are not supposed to be scientists. So it
Wow.
was kind of me being a rebel. And I still hear that some students, some female students tell me, in the US as well, that there is a little bit of discouragement for female students in occasions. And so I just feel that the female students that might be listening, I hope that you will be encouraged that there is no such a thing. And if that's your passion, I really hope you would pursue that.
That's right.
So, just to begin, why I'm doing what I'm doing, I've always been very interested in emissions. Since I was a kid, air pollution was somehow my thing. And when I say that I'm in environmental sciences, everybody thinks that I am an outdoor person. I was definitely not an outdoor kid. I was very much indoors, wanted to be looking at air pollution and think why this is happening and solve the puzzle. So for me, engineering was very intriguing, and I thought that maybe if I studied engineering, I could solve the problems. And that's how I studied engineering in the University of Tokyo. But then when I did that, I realized that the issues are so complex that it's really not possible to just use engineering to solve the environmental problem. And that's why I studied environmental policy. And I'm showing you the figure here because what I realized was that we really need every discipline to be able to tackle this very complex issues sometimes. So I've always been very fascinated with air pollution, and I was working on garbage burning issues, for example, in Nepal and in Tibet, and things of, the places that I never thought I would actually go to. And I also landed on agriculture because there is quite a bit of emissions that come out of the agricultural sector. And what I'm showing you here are some major air pollutants that come out. So there's methane. You've heard of cows burping, leading to a lot of methane. And there's a lot of ammonia emissions that happen as well. And those are coming from fertilizers because we use a lot of synthetic fertilizers, etc. And there's a lot of manure as well. But methane is also a greenhouse gas. So this results in air pollution and greenhouse gas, and it also leads to a lot of health impacts. So people are getting sick potentially in different places because air pollution also travels. So all those complex issues really fascinated me. And so that's why I was working on doing modeling. So I was just staring at the computer usually and doing coding, and I thought that was really interesting. But then the PhD student came in 2016, or a little bit earlier, maybe, but then he started really working on this agriculture project in 2016, and we were doing a lot of measurements at the University of Georgia. And he was a student in environmental health sciences, and so he wanted to do a little bit more work in health rather than just measuring greenhouse gas emissions at the farm. And we talked about he could do, and we found out that there are a lot of community gardens that are happening in the Metro Atlanta area. So here, what you're seeing in 2016, there were about or more than 300 community and urban gardens across Metro Atlanta area. And what was happening at that time was that the city was also getting very interested in doing agriculture to reduce the the food desert problem or the food apartheid problem. So if you don't have the fresh produce growing within your neighborhood, and if you didn't have a car, you wouldn't have the access to fresh produce. And that was happening in some of the underserved communities in Atlanta. And so the city was trying to increase the urban food production. And they coined the term Atlanta with agriculture in Atlanta. And what they were planning to do was to lease the land. So they had about 22 lots or so that they were going to lease to urban agriculture farmers so that they could grow vegetables and other fresh produce that could be used for the neighborhood. So that was a great idea, we thought, but we also wanted to make sure that all the lands that were going to be leased would be without any contamination.
Mhm.
And we were especially worried about it because, Atlanta is a very much industrial city. There was a lot of industry going on in the past, and we were concerned about all these potential contaminants that might have taken place in the past. And so we asked if we could potentially test for these contaminants in the areas where that was going to be leased. And so in doing that, we found in one of the lots that had very high lead levels. And at that time, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, had the regional screening level. That is to say that that is the level that's considered rather safe. And that level was 400 ppm. ppm is milligram per kilogram of soil. And what we tested in this lot was 430 ppm, milligram of lead, 430.9 milligram of lead in a kilogram of soil. And that was over the screening level. And so we were a little bit concerned because I think you would agree with me that this law looked like just an ordinary law in what we see in Havana. And why we are worried about that, I'm sure most of you are aware, especially after the Flint incident, there is a lot of health impacts from lead exposure, and it's especially worrisome for the kids. And what I found very scary in a way is that you would not notice, I think, I do not have kids, but if you were a parent and if your kid says that, you have headache, or if the kid is having headaches or some kind of their hearing problems. I don't think a lot of the kids, the parents would think that this is coming from lead exposure. And there are so many potential health impacts that can come from lead exposure, but I don't think that's what parents think about it's not something that's um, usually thought of. And if you don't test, you would not know. And because there's no universal testing in many of the states in the US, sometimes parents do not know that the kids are actually being exposed. And I think the big problem is that lead can actually block the signaling in the brain. And so you would have developmental issues and you would also have a problem in learning. And they can have, it's not going to be very easy in schools because of that reason. And I think many of you have seen the IQ scores, how it can be impacted. So at the top is the IQ scores in US children. It's a normal distribution, and 6 million are gifted and 6 million with intellectual disability. What happens if you are exposed to lead is that this distribution shifts to the left, and so the mean is lower. But I think what's most important is that we have 9.4 million people now that have intellectual disability. And I think what we have to think about is this happening equally across the land in the US? And I think everybody would agree that this is not equally distributed. So the people that are impacted more are usually in the underserved neighborhoods, mostly the people of color. They already have so much more exposures to other issues. And on top of that, if you get lead exposure, then this is going to be more increasing the cumulative risk. And so we got concerned, especially because the area that we found lead high soil level was in the underserved area. This was a historic, it's called Historic West Side. This is a low income and primarily Black neighborhood. And it used to be an industrial area as well. And so I don't know how many of you are from Georgia here, but this is Georgia. And we are here in Atlanta. This on the right-hand side, sorry, it's a little bit blurry, but this is the Atlanta area. When I say Metro Atlanta, we usually think about this inside the I-285 highway, Metro Atlanta area. And then this part is the historic west side in the rectangle. And so we started working with the community organization. We were very fortunate to be introduced to Historic Westside Gardens by Hercules at Emory. So Historic Westside Gardens has been working on urban gardening in the neighborhood for a while, and they were trying to increase home gardens as well. And so we were able to have their gardeners partner with us and collect soil samples together. So we created something like this so that the community gardeners can go together with the community members and then collect soil samples themselves. So we would create 30 rectangles and then have from each rectangle from about the same point, they collect 30 samples and that becomes one sample. And that's repeated from different spots 3 times so that we would collect triplicate samples from one area. And then that gets transferred to our lab and we would analyze. And so because of their help in collecting the soil samples, we were able to analyze the soil samples from 11 residential lots and 5 community gardens. And these are background sites that my students went to analyze themselves. And here you are seeing 2 different screening levels. So 400 is what I talked about. This was what used to be the EPA screening level. It actually got reduced this year, and now it is 200 ppm, so it's half of that. State gardening screening level at that time was 75, and strangely, this has actually increased. And so there's a little bit of a mismatch. But the main takeaway from this is that you can see that most of the sites are actually above the state gardening screening level at that time. And three of them in the residential lots were actually over 400 ppm. And so this to us was very worrisome. And when we gave the results back to the community members, actually we were told that one of these sites was a children's garden. And
Mm.
this was very emotional for us, obviously. And this really opened up a huge can of worms that I personally was not very prepared for. And as a modeler, that was when we really had to shift to do a better job in the community. And then that's when we started learning about community engaged research and how we can do the research better with the community members. But so this was a wake up call for us. And then so we talked about what we can do in the community now that we are seeing these high levels in some places. And the community leader said that they wanted to host a much bigger screening for the wider public. And so they suggested that we hold a screening during their tomato festival where they celebrate the tomato harvest. And so that's what we did. And at that tomato festival, a community member brought this rock piece to see if that might be the contamination source. This community member said that they're finding a lot of these things in the community and wanted to see what the lead level might be. And so we were doing the testing with what's called X-ray fluorescence, XRF. And when we shot this rock, it was about 4,000 ppm of lead. And so we were pretty certain that this might be causing the problem. And we were able to go around the neighborhood and we saw these pieces pretty visibly in many areas. And this turned out to be slag. So that is an industrial material coming from smelting. So they sometimes look very shiny as well. And so the unfortunate part was that some of the residents actually thought that these were very cute rocks. Some of them look like volcanic rocks as well. And so they, some of them were collecting them and then putting them in homes, etc. And so that was also unexpected way to be exposed as well. And there was a huge mound of slag in an empty lot in other areas, and the kids were playing there and being exposed without being known. And we think that this happened much long time ago in 50s or so. And so they were exposed without knowing about it. And so as you can see in this figure, slag soil, meaning the soil underneath these rocks, were also very high with lead levels. And so we were pretty certain that this was causing this lead contamination in the area. And so we reported this to the EPA, and then EPA brought this to the Georgia Environmental Protection Division, and Georgia Environmental Protection Division asked the EPA to do the investigation, and so that's how the investigation started. It was first with the 60 lots on Elm Street because that's where a lot of slag was present. And then within the 60 lots, more than half of the lots that they tested were over 400 ppm. So they expanded the lot to 360 lots that you see in purple. And then soon after, it got expanded to 1,098 lots in green. And now it is this pink area that's 2,087 lots. So it has expanded pretty substantially, and it is now a Superfund site, and it is also being listed as the national priorities list. So they are doing the cleanup, but we've also realized that there are a lot of issues that happen in these Superfund sites. And one thing was that some of the lots were actually just right below 400 ppm. So there was one person whose lot was determined to be 394 ppm. And because of the 6 ppm difference, they weren't eligible for cleanup. And so the community members were really curious what can be done for those lots. And they asked us if they could do phytoremediation in these lots with us to test the effectiveness. And so that's what we did. The phytoextraction is one method. If it's a phytoextraction, then you would actually be pulling it up, pulling the contaminants all the way to the leaves. And then you can harvest them. If it's phytostabilization, what it means is that you would have these contaminants around the roots. And so there are pros and cons to that, obviously, because if it's phytostabilization, it's still going to stay in the soil, but then they are not going to be as available to people. So people will be less impacted. So one of my students did the experiments in the greenhouse. So she collected the soil samples from these contaminated sites and grew 4 different plants and see how the soil lead levels change over time. Sorry, I just want to make sure the time is okay.
Yeah, we're still good.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay, good. And then, so the solid concentration levels after we grew plants, there were, as I said, as you saw, hopefully, cowpeas, Chinese cabbage, amaranth, and sunflower were the 4 plants that we tested. And cowpeas took up the most, and then you can see that it actually went to the leaves as well. But because of that, when the kids were to eat them, we found out that it would actually go over the recommended level of intake. So that was the problem because you might be able to take up the contaminants from the soil, but if you grow them, you can potentially have the toxic cowpeas that can be bad for your health. And that was the similar case for Chinese cabbage. So amaranth and sunflowers are great because those are just flowers, but they were not very effective in taking up the soil lead. So the initial level was about 550 ppm in this case. And so you can still see that, in the maximum case for cowpeas, it was only about 55, 60. In one sample, it took over 80 ppm of lead. But if you were to really clean up, you can see that this is not enough. And so another student tried to showcase this environmental justice problem. And I mentioned a little bit about how it's not possible to know if you are exposed without the blood lead level testing. So what I'm showing you here is the Metro Atlanta area. The background color is the median household income. So the lighter the color, the lower the median household income level. And you can see that in Atlanta, the southwest part of Atlanta is much lower income compared to the northern part of Atlanta. And the bubbles that you see, the size of the bubble is the proportion of kids that are screened for blood lead level. And as I mentioned, it's only about 25% maximum that are tested. And this is really unfortunate because, as I said, if you don't test, you do not know. The color of the bubble is the proportion of the kids that have higher than blood lead level. That's 5 micrograms per deciliter. The CDS, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, they used to have the blood lead level threshold of 5 micrograms per deciliter. That was improved, or that became more stringent to 3.5 micrograms per deciliter in, I believe, 2023. But you can see that in here, this is downtown Atlanta, 13% of the children actually had blood lead level that was higher than 5 micrograms per deciliter at that time. This is the area that became a Superfund site and where we found the soil lead. That is not necessarily showing as high proportion of blood lead levels, but that's also because we found out that they are not really tested, and this was really concerning to us. I don't have the time to talk about it, but this that you see high proportion of blood lead level, this is actually another Superfund site that we found. And I'm very worried that this might be because of these contaminations that's happening from soil. So then we started what's called community engaged student health study. This is to really understand what children might be exposed to. What we found out was that not many people knew about these issues, and there was a lot of home gardening that was happening. And so we just wanted to make sure that there was awareness. And also a lot of people, a lot of children actually eat soil. And some children that have pica have eat about 10 milligrams of soil per day. And so we wanted to see what the soil ingestion rates might be and how much they're exposed to lead and other chemicals, and really understand comprehensively the exposures. And one of the issues that was happening in the area was that the kids were not really tested for blood lead level, as I mentioned, but they were not really interested in testing either. So we wanted to see what would make them somewhat eager to test. And we've been testing this Tassel Plus equipment where you can just put it on the arm and get the blood draw. This has been slightly helpful, but there is still a lot of people hesitate to do the blood draw for the right reason. And with research especially, this has been quite hard. But what we've also noticed is that in some homes that we visit, we also test for lead paint, and lead paint is an issue in the area. We also see in some homes, mold is a very big issue. And so, as I mentioned earlier, it's not just one thing, but a lot of many things that these people are exposed to, and how they are impacted in cumulative ways is really something that we need to better understand. And so we've just been trying to raise more awareness of these issues, and I hope that those of you that are here would also be interested in raising awareness of these problems. But just to sum up, so lead contamination is quite common. Unfortunately, we are finding it everywhere in Atlanta in some cases. And so, but in this specific case, we were able to really focus on this issue and figure out what the source is because of the community input. And working with the community partners really led to different questions and different projects. And participant recruitment has really been a challenge, but having community partners in these events have been really fruitful, and we can get more interest. We are testing different mechanisms to do the blood draw, as I mentioned. And I think the most important takeaway from this is that this is not just one issue problem. There are a lot of different exposures that underserved communities are going through, and how can we make sure that the kids are safe is really something that I think we really need to think about. So I have a big number of students in the lab. So I've been doing all the talking, but there are a lot of students that are really doing so much work on the ground. So I really want to thank them. And this is the CECHS team, the Community Engaged Children's Health Study team that work on the ground in Atlanta. And I would also like to really acknowledge a lot of the people that were very instrumental in finding this problem. So this here is Sam Peters. He was the PhD student that I mentioned that started this project. This is Rosario Hernandez. She's now the executive director of Historic Westside Gardens. And without her, really, we are not going to be here. So I would also like to acknowledge all the Emory collaborators who've been really helping us in this project. as well as the government partners. Tim Frederick at EPA has really been so helpful. And without him, I don't think we would have been able to get where we are now. And of course, funding and other community partners, as well as Rosario. We're so grateful that they are there for us. With that, I hope I didn't go too late, but I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
All right. Hey, Nancy.
Yes, this was really interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Ari. I have a couple questions before we open up to our audience. So everybody thinking about the questions that you have. When you're working with community partners, or when you're trying to engage the community to do the testing, you were talking about some of the challenges that you ran into. How did you navigate some of those challenges, especially with you have people who are renters, might not speak English as their first language or speak it as at all. How did you navigate that challenge?
Yeah, so this area that we work in is not really an immigrant area, and so we don't really have a language issue, but the main issue is the renters. And so the people that are renting, they need to get the approval from the owners. And we have heard a lot that they cannot test because if the owners were to find out, then they will be kicked out. And so that has been a really big issue. And we are finding that some owners also don't want to test because if they test and if they find lead, they feel that they cannot sell the house. So this is a much bigger issue in the northern part of Atlanta that I showed. So in that area, that's more wealthy neighborhood. And so almost everybody said that they do not want to test and they just started selling. And so that liability really does a very big problem. And we are trying to see what would be the mechanism that can really make everybody be incentivized and be willing to clean up.
Yeah, that's a big challenge.
Yeah.
And so when this started happening, people were selling their homes.
So some people, that's right. So some people did not want to. So if you don't know, you do not need to disclose, right? And so then they said, okay, we will just sell. So we do see homes that just start selling.
Yeah, that's a major issue. And I was going to make a comment on that in terms of the broader issue of because all of your work here is based on measuring stuff, testing
Yes.
stuff. And we sort of live, it seems, in a culture where everybody has an opinion and a belief, and oftentimes it is not measured. It's not based on measurement, it's not based on testing, and everybody has their little social media thing. And yeah, so in order for us to know and to be aware, measurement has to take place. I mean, yeah, before science, I know in my field of chemistry, before measurement, was part of chemistry, it was just alchemy. People just, trying different things and having their own beliefs about how to change metals into gold and stuff. That's opinion, that's belief, that's conspiracy. If we want to, if we want to make any change, if we want to know something for a fact, we have to measure. I mean, that's fundamental and foundational. So I just wanted to make that point in a very strong way, because it seems like our culture is just, people just make claims.
Well, it's based on feeling, right? And then they look for what backs up how they feel.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. But I think there are also some, we definitely do need the data for the government to act. I think because we were able to show what the level was, then the EPA was able to come in and do the investigation. But I also realized that, even though we say community, it's never heterogeneous, and there are so many people that are involved. And so my main takeaway from this project is that there are so many different views, even in the same community. And so we cannot just go with one community leader saying this is what we should do. And we really need to reach a lot of the community members to know what they are interested in and what we should be doing as scientists. But they are also having multiple jobs and they don't have time to be talking to us. And so that's just the biggest struggle. Like, how can we actually do something with the community members when they are so overburdened, when they are so time limited? It's just not, there's just really no easy solution for that. And I think the higher ed, we are not really having enough training to deal with these solutions and situations. And I think we really need to work on that so much better.
It's a great opportunity for science communication.
That's right.
That's right. That's right. So
I've done some projects working with communities, and for many reasons, right? They don't trust when you're coming in.
Exactly.
And rightfully so, for a lot of different reasons, right? They've been
Yes.
told they were going to get something they didn't, or now they have to disclose that they have lead in the soil and they can't
Yes.
sell the home. But working with community partners really seems to be that one of the key access into the community, because they're trusted and they're already in that community. You talked a little bit about using or working with some community partners. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so we work a lot with the different community-based organizations. So I mentioned Historic Westside Gardens. So they were absolutely instrumental because they were the ones that were willing to work with us. They were very concerned that they might be exposing people more by doing what they thought was a good thing to have home gardens. And so I think our interests really aligned. But they were also very frustrated at times because there were so many these liability issues that we never thought of at first. And people are busy and they didn't want to have the blood draws. And so I think just to have everybody really involved, it cannot be just one organization. We really have to involve the schools, really have to involve daycare centers, faith communities. And so that's what we've been doing, like to really build the community from everywhere and see what might be the necessary, what might be the easy entry point for them. Because if the kids are already going to the school and then if there is something there, that's definitely easy for them. If they're already going to the church, they would already go to the church for the back to school event, for example. So that was one of the very successful events. So yeah, that we really rely on them to reach the community.
we could open it up to others for questions, comments.
Looks like Patricia has a question. Do you want to mute, or do you want to type into the chat what your question is, Patricia?
She could
I've just unmuted. Just
Yes.
a quick question, that this kind of creates a situation where rather than soil use for growing vegetables, etc., you might be better to encourage them to do container gardening or even hydroponics, which would have the same effect, but would not necessarily would get round the soil contaminant problem. Just a thought.
Yes, absolutely. So, if they do want to do gardening, we say that first test, and then if the level is high, then we always say that the gardens, what is the term? I'm suddenly forgetting. The raised beds.
Yes.
And then, make sure that the soil is clean, and also the aquaponics. That's definitely a very good point. Making as long as the water is not contaminated.
Right, exactly.
We've had in our community, they have these bags of dirt. It's like a nylon bag to do that container gardening in an easier capacity. Marlene, you had a question.
Okay, I think Mark was before me. Mark, are you okay? Okay.
I'm okay. Go ahead, Marlene.
Okay. I was wondering about the decontamination process. Is how long does it take, and can that be promoted as a way of encouraging testing, especially the stakeholder, the property owners, if they know that decontamination is accessible, maybe not too lengthy or costly, that could probably be a way to encourage them to, hey, let me get my property tested, and could probably advertise their property as lead-free if possible. And then I was also thinking about the industries that are polluting. What are their roles? I mean, I think at this point we know some of the things that can contribute to the formation of these slags. What's their role in this?
Yeah, those are great questions. Thank you. So, to answer your first question, so what the EPA does to clean up, first, like EPA goes to test the soil, and then if they determine that the level is more than 400 ppm, or in this case, currently over 200 ppm, then they would be able to clean it up for free. Per lot, it's about $500,000. And so what they do is they dig about 1 to 2 feet, and then they take out the soil, and then they put the new soil in. In this neighborhood, they actually, in the first lot, they dug 10 feet and still found slag. And so what they do is they are putting the plastic, very bright plastic, and then, making it clear, hopefully, that if people come later on, that they know that there is contamination. And in that process as well, they have to cut all the trees. And so that was also a very bad problem in the community. In the first week, about 22 trees were cut, and the community was not aware. So there was quite a big outrage on that topic too. So some people actually say they don't want the EPA to come and clean up because they find the trees to be so important for them. So there is like a lot of multiple issues. But then, if they don't qualify for free remediation, then 500K is not something that a lot of us can afford. And even then, you dig and it's still there. You will never be perfectly free. Around your house, it is going to be clean, and they can do a very good job with the landscaping. So I do have to say that some of the residents are very happy with how it looks now. But I think it is still a very big process, and it takes years to clean up. Like, in the West Side now, it's listed on the national priorities list, but we would still expect it to be a couple of years longer. And so then for the housing value to go up, it takes a decade or so. So that is quite a big social economic burden for sure.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, the second question, in terms of the remediation. So did I answer both or no? I feel like
Well,
I
you
didn't.
answered the first part. The second was the role of the companies that are
That's right.
contributing to the
Sorry.
pollution.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So the EPA actually goes after them, and then they try to get the money from them because that is their liability. The main problem right now is that the law that came in, the circular, was before they dumped, probably. So, and then also these companies have most likely been bankrupt or don't exist anymore. So that is a very big issue, but they are still going after them in hopes that they can receive some of the money that they are spending on these Superfund sites. And this is mainly considered to be from lead smelters, and there were supposedly 11 lead smelters in Atlanta, but we don't know if it's from the local area or is it from carried from the railway. We do see a lot of slag around the railway. And my hypothesis is that they might have brought some waste from outside and then dumped close to the railway.
Mark?
Yeah, thank you. Marlene asked a couple of, I asked my questions as well, but I wanted to know, you made reference to Superfund sites. Is that what it was? Can you elaborate on what that is? And then I have a two-part question also.
Okay.
Once you've grown food that's been contaminated by lead or other elements, is there a way of remediation and removing the contaminants from the food?
Okay. Thank you. So I'm so sorry I did not say what the Superfund is. So the Superfund is the site where it's considered contaminated so that the federal government needs to clean up. And so that's what the Superfund site is, and the West Side is being remediated because of that reason if the law is over the level that the government deems unsafe for lead. And in terms of the produce, that is a very interesting question. I do not believe there is something that we can do. For example, kale is considered to take up a lot of lead. If you cook it, is it going to go away? I don't think so, but I have not. Yeah, Desmond is saying no. I don't. So
It's
there is
still
nothing
gonna-
you can do, I believe.
Yeah, it's still going to be there.
Then I eat a lot of kale, so I get it from the grocery store. How do I know it's safe?
Yeah, so I think that the food FDA, they are supposed to be testing for those issues, and that's why now we have, I think, seen the newspaper articles on the dark chocolate. They are finding that some of the dark chocolates have pretty high lead levels. So these issues do come up, and without testing, we don't know. And so I don't just want to scare people, but there are issues that we don't know and we get exposed. So I think this is something that we really need to be mindful of and consider how we grow food and where we get the food from, etc. as well.
So
Thank you. Excellent presentation.
Thank
so I
you.
can't resist talking about some chemistry as well, just to make sure everybody understands the danger of lead. So we all know that calcium is like an essential element in, our living systems and stuff. It so happens that the size of the calcium ion and the size of the lead ion is pretty much identical. The charge on calcium ion and the charge on lead ion is identical, which means it's very easy for lead to replace calcium. So just having that basic understanding that these two, elements in their ionic form are very similar in size and charge helps to appreciate how lead could just run amok. Everywhere that calcium is needed, lead could be inserted in our living systems.
Do we have more questions from the audience? We do have some comments that I do want to read.
Mm-hmm.
And Ari, when you were talking about the phytoremediation, where the lead is being uptaked into the plant, what are you doing with the plants once they now have all this lead in them?
Right.
They don't go
Yes.
onto the school salad plate, I hope.
Exactly. And so my original naive hope was that we could potentially create something that has a lot of biomass. So then we can use it for energy and making sure that none of them goes to the air. Like if we had a good filter system and incineration system, I think that's the best way possible, because that biomass is contaminated now. And then we definitely we cannot just put it anywhere. So that's a very good question. But that doesn't exist right now. And so we were just putting into the toxic waste.
Okay.
Laurel, you should unmute because you're making several good points here that I think people need to hear you verbalize. Laurel?
I'm working on it. Okay. So I have two screens. You never know where it is.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so first of all, Ari, I really appreciate your work. Leanne Bing is my colleague. I was like texting people like, you really got to get on this call. So one thing, there are a few points with engagement, and we've done two lead screening events in Benton Harbor.
Yep.
One, we've done two soil sampling events. I know we've done a lot in Atlanta. We have a similar situation where housing was located in East Chicago, Indiana, on a former lead smelter, and when they sampled the site for residents, they missed the hotspots, whoever they is. But it was not an ATSDR project; it was a HUD project. So could have been a
Could you tell
contract.
everybody what ATSDR is?
Oh, yes,
basically?
it's
Yes.
the long acronym, the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry.
Mhm.
And one of the most common contaminants in all the types of sites that we work on, land reuse sites, brownfield, Superfund sites, lead is usually in the top three. I've never really had a site that didn't have lead in the top three. And everybody wants to say, oh, it's from the paint, but very often you have other sources of lead, as Erie indicated. Lead's also in the Earth's crust. It's natural in our environment. Some areas have higher background levels of lead. It doesn't go away. It's a metal. It stays forever. Boiling your water can concentrate and make you can have a bigger dose of lead. And we, with limited funding, it's very frustrating. The best thing we can do is educate people on how to avoid exposures. Eating a calcium-rich diet if you're a child, taking your shoes off if you've been gardening, using those raised beds. But it's sort of like chasing the dragon. It's one of the most common contaminants. And I do want to bring up, and Erie, maybe you could comment on this. In January, the US EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, lowered the residential soil guidelines for lead in soil. And while that number 200 is more stringent than the previous 400 parts per million, so 400 parts of lead per million parts of soil, in areas where there's an identified environmental justice concern, for example, or socioeconomic factors such as low income, racial and minority groups, the guideline is then lowered to 100 parts per million. And in some areas, 100 is your background level of lead in soil. So I don't know what that would mean in terms of yard cleanup. If you are in an environmental justice area and the soil is at 100 parts per million, would EPA, so we don't have that guidance yet. I haven't seen it, just curious, but it's just so important. And I really love your presentation.
Thank you so much, Laurel. You brought such a great point because we've been talking a lot with DPA about this, and I am quite upset that the West Side does not qualify as an environmental justice community because of the level of pain neighborhood, like the households, I'm told. But I just feel that it's because it's not tested. And so, it's great that it's being stringent, but there is a lack of data in these environmental justice communities to begin with. And so it is really hard. And if that is the level that they determine the, remediation as well, it just gets so tricky, so sensitive. And as you mentioned, the background, you have to find so many things. And what happens is that the data collection takes so much time, and we cannot really get to the people at the time we need, like for the kids. And so that's why I worry a lot. It's great that it's being reduced, but I think there's a lot of problem. I know Mark has been having the hand up for a very long time, so
And
sorry.
my hand is partially up.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Isn't it also true though that no amount of lead is safe?
That's correct. No amount of lead is safe for children. That's correct.
Okay.
Go ahead, Princess.
Yeah, I'm so glad that the subject I thought was going to be more toward gardening. So I called up one of our premier gardeners to be on this call, but she is also my commissioner for the city of Benton Harbor. The city of Benton Harbor went through what Flint went through, but for different reasons. We cannot drink our water, brush our teeth, or prepare food with our water for 2 years. And even though we had our lead pipes replaced underneath the ground, and the state came in and other partners, and they funded that for us. And that took on a lot. And so I was actually appointed by the governor and the mayor to help from the community engagement, community outreach aspect of it. But my commissioner is on this line because we're talking about super funding and we're talking about environmental justice. We have a super fund project that was here in Benton Harbor and I guess I would need to know more knowledge that really helped out a golf course and it helped out a residential area that probably isn't part of the environmental justice community. So it's really important that we look into that. Then the last part, in which there are other parts, you talked about, and I didn't know this, Laurel. So I'm so glad you're on the call because I have down here, where can we get resources? Where can we go to get data collection, sources, etc. And Laurel, I know you can help us with that, but I was hoping that our guest speaker could help us as well, because you just talked about in January how it went from 400 to 200 to 100 in areas. Laurel, do you think that would consist of Benton Harbor, where they have lowered the standard of lead?
You know, according to the EPA's July 2024 guidance, I think it was July 17th, so you can Google it. And what we would do in health education. So this is what's really interesting is we still do soil shops. ATSDR will still come if we have the resources. Our regional offices can do, I think, one per quarter. So we've done 2 in Benton Harbor. We have 2 XRF machines. We ship them all over the country. We also try to borrow them. So if we sampled soil and we're clearing health education messages right now. So if I saw 100 and, it takes 30 seconds to put Benton Harbor into the EJ screen or ATSDR's EJ index and see that it is indeed lighting up for socioeconomic and environmental burden and justice indicators, then we would recommend health protective measures, take your shoes off after gardening, use containers, really build the soil up a good 18 inches. And plant uptake varies, so it's very complicated. So not all plants take up lead, and then the soil composition and properties itself determine how much lead might be absorbed. But I would also say Benton Harbor's way ahead of the game. Now Benton Harbor has become a model community because of the state's response and your local leaders, including you, Princella, make a noise to look at the lead service lines, which have been replaced. And now the state is doing home health assessments, which may not be going as fast or as efficiently as possible, but that's fairly unheard of. I mean, you're making history in what you're doing. And
Well, we are, but we've been talking to you about our other passion since the lead situation is asthma and dealing with healthy homes, healthy foods, and things of that capacity. We talked, our speaker talked about mold. We've been focusing on lead, but I would love to hear more about mold. But all of that is so important. And this Environmental Fridays today, from the very first host who introduced our co-host, she talked about STEM for children. I'm like loving this episode, Dr. Murray. And now we had, is it Erie or Ari?
Erie.
It's airy.
Yeah, she talked about so many different things. Even though we've made progress in Benton Harbor, we're still dealing with 25, and I think that's a low number for Blacks dealing with asthma and indoor and outdoor air pollution challenges and crisis. We're still dealing with food, as she calls it, deserts apartheid. We're still dealing with that. And these are all things that we're trying to come together and help our community with. So we've made progress. But in a way, it seems like some of the progress have kind of declined or it has settled. when the issues and the data is still talking and showing that we are still in need of help and assistance. I really wanted to see if, I hate to put her on the spot, but she is a gardener, but she's really into the environment. And that is my commissioner, Juanita Henry, who's on the call. I don't know if she's in a position to unmute and listen or to say anything. But even if she's not able to, Laurel, I would really welcome an opportunity, since you're always visiting our community, to meet with her and to talk about what we can do to find solutions for Benton Harbor and Barron County, Michigan.
Juanita, Commissioner Henry, you want to
Yes.
say something?
She may not be in a position right
Okay,
now,
that's
just in
cool.
case. But if not, I just wanted to.
I'm there. I'm there, and I'm so excited to hear all of this information. I'm excited about the stem cell. I'm excited about the data selection and the opportunities for my community that has been neglected for 3-4 decades. So our Superfund site is there, but it hasn't been remediated as yet. We probably have a couple more that have not been touched. So Benton Harbor is ripe for all of these innovative people that are out there and that are willing to come in to help us.
So are you saying the sites have been designated Superfund, but there hasn't been work done on it? Is that what
I'm saying that there is probably more super site fund spots that have not been addressed.
Okay.
But the ones that was addressed was in place and causing havoc with everything that was around them for decades. I'd say 3 decades, maybe 3 decades. But there's probably other Superfund sites that have not even been designated, and we need to do the work for the future. So I'm excited about all that I've been hearing, and all the opportunities that Benton Harbor could ask for.
So another aspect, Ari, that I wanted to ask you about is whether you or your department has summer research opportunities for students from, I would say, high school, college, what have you. Do you guys have summer research opportunities?
So we are actually now, yeah, we do have summer research opportunities for students, and then I do usually take high school students too. And we do a lot of outreach. So we just submitted a grant to do more workforce development from pre-K to grad school. If this goes through, then that would be very exciting. One thing we might be able to think about is how can we link the environmental education, between our institutions and then between the two communities. I think that would be really great if there is interest. And we just got the HUD grant too, so we will be working on the lead paint remediation and things. So I think these issues, sorry, go ahead.
We could definitely have that collaboration discussion.
Yeah.
You just heard from the commission, one of the commissioners, Laurel from ATSDR. So we have Prince Seller. So we have the people that are definitely interested and have experience that we could come together and have some collaboration.
Yeah, that would be great. And then, I think we deal with one issue at the time, and it seems like that never ends. And I think that is true. But hopefully, by making one step ahead, that's making so much difference. So, Princess, I think I'm very intrigued by what you said, and people really, I'm sure they really appreciate what you do. So, thank you.
Mark?
And I'm really excited that I heard you say pre-K to grad school.
Yeah.
That is so exciting. And I know that once we get our children involved in it, they're going to protect their future and they're going to educate their parents and grandparents.
Exactly. I think that is so true. And then, now with the math and science test scores going so down in the US, we cannot just fix the higher ed. Like it has to be the systematic change. And I think the kids need to be really involved.
Yep.
That's ironic because that's how I actually met Dr. Murray. No, I met him through the flats, but then he started the Science Initiative for African Americans in Benton Harbor. And so that's really how we ended up, what's that, 20 years ago?
Yep, 20 years.
And it's something we need to work on. So even hearing, I think it was Nancy, and listening to, she's so beautiful, both of you are, and listening to what you have been doing and doing to make a difference in our world and in our communities is very powerful, this session that we're having. Thank you.
Mark?
Yeah, what is the ethical and or legal responsibilities of, I know it's hard to get residents to comply with testing, but what about community gardens?
Yeah, so I think the agriculture sector has a lot of lobbying, and so I've always wondered about the big farms. I'm sure the food is tested, but I think the legal component for the actual farms, what they have to be tested, I think that can be worked on as well.
Yeah, I think that's important because we're sitting on 17 acres and we do farming. But when we went to, it's the Michigan State Extension, they were just only testing our area to see if it had the right type of soil for the type of vegetables we wanted to grow. But it's now that I'm more into the environment and what's really important from a health perspective, I'll recheck with them and see if that's something that they would do and are doing. And if not, Dr. Murray and Mark and Laurel will do it. We have a commissioner on the line. We got a host of other people, and Dr. Murray has a lot of connections. We can make this happen in our community because it's so important. Because we've been growing and we've never had it tested, but just to see if it's something that would grow the best collard greens or tomatoes, but never is the soil good soil. So that's really important.
That's really, really important.
Yeah.
We do have a question from Gloria. Is there a concern that with the change of administration that's coming in, and they are very pro-business, is this work will be set back both in terms of funding and legislation?
Yes, I think that's the biggest concern. Last time the Trump administration was in, then we did not, all the environmental regulations got really taken away, and a lot of information got taken down from the website as well. And so what's going to happen in terms of funding, I think they are really trying to get rid of all the climate related funding too. So that is the major concern for us.
Sorry,
So
my internet went.
is it okay for states to make policy if regarding the environment and stuff?
Yeah, so it would have to be really states that's going to take the lead now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But sorry, I do have to go.
Okay.
This has been great, but
yes. Thank you so much.
yeah, I'm very sorry.
That's okay. We understand. So Nancy, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, sure. Ari, thank you. This has been fantastic. And thank you everybody for coming and bringing your questions and also your feedback and your expertise. I think we had a really great conversation this morning on the need for this type of testing, some of the challenges that come about, and how do we overcome those barriers working together, because there's a lot of work to be done and it's not just isolated to Atlanta. And I thought it was really interesting when you were talking about the rocks and the kids picking them up, because that would be me.
Yes.
And bringing them home for my rock collection.
I know.
So yeah, I mean, it does affect a lot of us across the country. So thank you so much for your time today. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Professor Murray, for having and hosting us. And thank you all for your questions. I hope you all have a wonderful Friday. I did put Ari's link to her lab in the chat. So if you are interested in continuing to follow her work along with the work that her lab is doing, you can do so there.
Send it out by email too. All right. Thank you. Have a great
Thank you so much.
weekend. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.